Welcome to the discussion video on accounting for partnership liquidation. At the end of the module, we will be able to state the order of priority in the settlement of claims in cases of liquidation, and then we account for the liquidation of a partnership. So what is liquidation? Liquidation, in contrast to partnership dissolution, is the termination of the business operations or the winding up of the affairs. So, unlike in partnership dissolution, wherein the business can be continued by the existing partners, the partnership liquidation is the actual termination or stoppage of the operations of the business. This is the winding up of the affairs of the partnership. So when we say winding up of the affairs, um, we summarize all the non-cash assets to be converted into cash, and then we account for our liabilities. So we can be able to pay using the realized assets, and then we finally distribute the remaining amounts of capital to the partners or to the owners. So it is a process by which we account for assets to cash, liabilities are settled, and remaining amount to owners. So the liquidation can be either voluntary. So when we say voluntary, there is a consensus between all of the partners, and it's assumed that when a voluntary liquidation happens, the partnership is solvent. However, it can also be involuntary or because of bankruptcy. The conversion of the non-cash assets, which is illustrated in item 1, assets are converted into cash. When we say the conversion of assets into cash, yung non-cash assets into cash, we refer to it as realization. And then when we say the settlement of the claims of creditors and owners, this is referred to as liquidation. So when we sell our non-cash items because of the process of liquidation, we have to convert our non-cash items to cash. We realize our assets. So kung makikita mo sa problems, the assets realized, ang ibig sabihin nun, the assets are converted into cash or sold for cash. So when the term is liquidation, this means the settlement of the liabilities to the internal and external parties, in this case the creditors and the owners. However, when it is termed as partnership liquidation, it includes the process of realization and the liquidation. So when we use accounting for partnership liquidation, ang ibig sabihin nito is from the realization of the assets up to the final settlement of the capital to the partners or to the owners of the business. So the winding up process starts with the conversion of the non-cash assets into cash. As such, the timing of the realization of the non-cash assets determines the manner on which the liquidation is carried out. So there are two methods on liquidating a partnership. One is through lump sum and second is through installment liquidation. So as the term implies, when we say lump sum, all the non-cash assets are sold simultaneously. So ibebenta ng sabay-sabay itong mga assets na ito, and then kung magkano ang proceeds ay it will be used to settle the liabilities of the partnership, and then all the remaining amounts will be paid to the partners. However, under installment liquidation, ang sinasabi dito sa installment liquidation ay the cash will be distributed to the partners whenever assets are realized or on an installment basis. An installment basis as cash becomes available. Of course, there are priorities. When we look at the priorities of the partnership, kung sino ang unang babayaran, One is the outside creditors, second is the inside creditors, and third is the owner's capital balances. So kung mapapansin mo, unang babayaran yung mga liabilities sa outside because of the public relations, and then second, yung liability dun sa mga partners, and third lang yung capital balances. The right of offset is at hand when we account for partnership liquidation. Ang sinasabi sa right of offset is the loan payable to a partner has a higher priority over the partner's capital balance. However, the legal right of offset allows a deficit in a partner's capital account to be offset by a loan payable to that partner. So kung merong liability ang partnership doon sa partner, una munang ibibigay yung utang ni partnership doon sa partner na yon before tayo mag-distribute ng um, capital ng bawat partner. So let us look at how lump sum and installment liquidation differs. So under lump sum liquidation, item number 1 has already been discussed. Okay, let's proceed with number 2. The total gain or loss on the sale is allocated to the partners' capital balances based on their profit and loss ratios. For installment, the carrying amount of any unsold non-cash asset is considered as a loss. This is allocated to the partners' capital balances based on their profit and loss ratios. Because of the nature of lump sum liquidation na sabay-sabay binenta yung non-cash assets at hand, mas madali nating ma-identify kung magkano total gain or loss. Then, i-allocate mo lang yun sa yung capital balances based on the profit and loss ratios. However, under the installment liquidation, different scenario yan because dahil installment nga ang pagre-realize ng asset, pwedeng merong mga unsold non-cash asset. So, paano ang treatment dyan under installment liquidation? It is considered as a loss. So, whether or not the non-cash asset has been sold or not, it is considered as a loss when we already make the liquidation. So later on, you will appreciate kung paano ginagawa. Next, under lump sum, actual liquidation expenses are allocated to the partner's capital balances. Mas madali kasi under lump sum liquidation dahil kung magkano yung total liquidation expenses mo as of the date ng liquidation ay yun na ang actual liquidation expenses mo. However, under installment liquidation, dahil meron ka pang future liquidation na ina-expect dahil installment nga ang nagiging process, meron tayong tinatawag na estimated future liquidation expenses. So, yan po ay isiniset aside mo na rin or ina-allocate mo na rin using the profit and loss ratios. Next, the liabilities to outside creditors are fully settled. Okay. However, under installment method, it can be fully or partially settled. Same is true with the liabilities to the inside creditors. It is fully settled under lump sum, pero under installment, it can be partially or fully settled. Number 6, any remaining cash is distributed to the owners in final settlement of their interests. Okay? However, under installment method, both the liabilities to outside and inside creditors are fully settled. Any remaining cash, less cash set aside for future liquidation expenses is distributed to the owners or as partial settlement of their interest. So, meron tayong portion for cash set aside for future liquidation expenses under installment liquidation. Dahil po pwedeng merong administrative expenses na mai-incur in the future. So, hindi pwedeng ibigay na lahat doon sa partners natin. Unlike sa lump sum na wala nang liquidation process na pagdadaanan dyan. So, let us illustrate this, yung lump sum and installment liquidation under illustration 1. So, on January 1, the partners of ABC decided to liquidate. The following information was made available. So, binigyan ka ng cash, AR, inventory equipment totaling 500,000. Then, the liabilities and the capital of the partners. So, sa accounts payable, yung 30,000, this is an for outside creditors. Itong payable to be is an inside creditor. So case 1, lump sum liquidation. Information on the conversion of non-cash assets is as follows. So item A, 50,000 was collected on the accounts receivable. The balance is uncollectible. B, 70,000 was received from the entire inventory. C, the equipment was sold for 250,000. And D, 2,000 liquidation expenses were paid. So the requirement is to determine the amounts of cash distributed to the partners in the final settlement of their interest. So magkano daw ang na-receive ng bawat isang partners after the the liquidation, lump sum liquidation process. So please remember the steps because we will be using these steps all the way. So step 1, we compute for the gain or loss on the sale. So ang step 1 muna dito, we compute for the gain or loss on the sale. So 1 is to compute for the net proceeds. So magkano ba ang pinagbentahan ng mga non-cash items na yan? So non-cash items lang ang titingnan mo muna dahil yaan ang naka-indicate on this problem. And normally yung cash item, yung cash account title ay hindi naman nabebenta kasi kung magkano yun, yun naman na talaga yun. Because it is already realized. Bakit mo pa i-convert yung cash into cash, di ba? So, we look at the non-cash items when we realize these assets. So, number 1, the collection on accounts receivable. Magkano bang nakolekta sa accounts receivable? Ang sabi, 50,000 daw and the rest ay uncollectible. So, ibig sabihin, 10,000 ay uncollectible dahil 60 minus 50,000. Sale of inventory, magkano binenta? 70,000 was received for the entire inventory. So, yung inventory 120, nabenta ng 70,000. So, 70,000. Next, the equipment was sold for 250. 300 siya, nabenta ng 250. So, 250. So, kung mapapansin mo, puro loss. Then, merong liquidation expenses, ibawas mo na yan kaagad dyan. So, liquidation expenses, 2,000. So, the net cash proceeds ay 368,000. Ibig sabihin, yung non-cash items mo, ito yung na pagbentahan niya, including or incorporating the liquidation expenses kasi yan yung gastos para ma-proceed mo yung pagbebenta. Kumbaga, may expenses kang ma-i-incur dyan sa pagbebenta ng mga assets. So, pwedeng mga notarial fees or other expenses. So, itong net proceeds ngayon will be compared to your carrying amount. Magkano ba ang carrying amount ng assets mo? Let us look. 60 plus 120 plus 300 is 480 or 500,000 minus 20 ka lang dyan. So, 480,000 ang yung carrying amount ng non-cash. Remember, non-cash items. So, 480. So, magkano yung na-compute mo kanina? 368,000 minus 480,000 is 112,000. So, yan po ang total loss mo. Kasi ang carrying amount, 480, pero nabenta mo lang siya ng 368,000. Yan lang ang na-receive mo, including incorporating the liquidation expenses. So now, dahil alam mo na ang total loss mo on the realization of the assets, step 2 is to allocate the loss on the partner's capital, but first, you incorporate the right of offset. So tingnan po natin. So A, B, and C, ang capital balances nila 100, 150, and 200. Okay. First, i-indicate muna natin yung right of offset ni B. So si B ay may utang ng partnership kay B, so babayaran mo na yan ni partnership. So that is 20,000. So now, the adjusted balances of A is 100, B 170, and C 200,000. So nag-increase ang partnership capital at ng 400 ng 20,000 at ngayon siya ay 470,000 na. Then now, you allocate for the loss. Yung loss na 112,000, you multiply it with the profit and loss sharing ratio. Ang profit and loss sharing ratio nila ay 20, 30, 50. So, yan po. 22,400, 33,600, 56,000. And then, kung ito yung capital balance, ito yung allocation of loss, so ibabawas mo po yan doon sa kanilang capital balance. So the amounts received by A is 77,600, 136,400 for B, and 144,000 for C. Total of 358,000. So there is a way on how to check the accuracy of the computation on the amounts received by the partner. So paano yan? Dapat kasi yung amounts na na-receive ng partner should be equal to the cash available for distribution to the partners. Kasi hindi pwede na mas malaki yung naipamigay na amount, yung amounts na natanggap ng partner, pero yung cash available ay maliit. And vice versa. So dapat lagi pong equal yan. So how do we check the accuracy? One is to use this template and checking. One, the beginning balance of the cash, kasi hindi naman na yan binibenta, is 20,000. The net proceeds from the sale of the non-cash assets is 368 as computed. Then less mo lang yung payment to outside creditors na 30,000 dahil hindi naman yan kasama doon sa binili. So 20 plus 368 is 388 minus 30 is 358,000. So equal ba yung cash available for distribution to the partners and the total amounts received by the partners? Yes. So dapat po ay tama yan. So how do we journalize the transactions? One, una, yung realization muna ng non-cash assets. So magkano ba siya nabenta? 368,000 siya nabenta based on the net cash proceeds computation. So 368,000. So naka-incorporate na po dito yung liquidation expenses. Debit, the loss on sale, 112,000, and then credit, receivables, inventory, and equipment. Kasi binawasan mo yung amounts nila. Kung magkano po siya, ineliminate mo na po yung total amounts ng assets na receivable, inventory, and equipment. 60, 120, and 300. So ngayon, wala na pong asset na receivable, inventory, and equipment sa kanilang partnership books. Next, we recognize the loss, the allocation of the loss, i-recognize po natin. So we eliminate the loss by crediting loss on sale 112,000, and then ang katapat po niyan is yung share ng yung bawas doon sa capital ng partner. So A capital 22,400, 33,600 for B, and 56,000 for C as computed. Ito po yung nandito sa ating tabulation. So next, to record the settlement of the liabilities to outside creditors. So debit accounts payable and then credit cash 30,000. Next, to record the settlement of liability to inside creditor, debit payable to B and then credit cash, 20,000. And then, to record the final settlement of the partner's capital balances. So, ito po yung na-compute natin dito. Magkano ang total niyan? 338,000 na lang po yan dahil yung loan na kay B ay na-entry na po natin dito. So, pwede naman siyang compound entry, isa lang. So, since in this case magkahiwalay, ay ganyan po ang treatment natin. So, pwede rin siyang i-compound entry. So, ang cash mo dito, 338. Ang A capital, 77,600. B capital, 116,400 dahil ayun na po sa taas yung 20,000. And then C capital is 144,000. Okay, we can prepare a formal report on the liquidation through the statement of liquidation. So ano bang sinasabi sa statement of liquidation? This is a financial report that highlights the realization or the receipts from asset disposals and the liquidation, the settlement of the claims of a partnership. So in the okay, let's look at the statement of a liquidation. So in the CPA board exam, you will not be required to prepare a statement of liquidation. So bakit kailangan itong i-discuss? Because there are items that can only be and can easily be computed when it is plotted in a statement of a liquidation kumbaga sa isang statement of liquidation report. There are items, for example, bibigyan ka ng the amounts that has been distributed to the partners, and you will be squeezing it back kung ang tinatanong is kung magkano nabenta yung non-cash assets. So, may mga ganong scenario. So, it will be easier for you if you have a picture on your mind of the statement of liquidation report. So let us take a look at this. So the balances before liquidation is 20, 480, 30, 20, 100, 150, 200. So yung non-cash items are lump sum na po diyan dito sa non-cash. So pag kinonvert mo yung non-cash assets, ay magkano siya nabenta? 368. So idadagdag mo yan sa yung cash. Dahil lahat yon ay nabenta na, ibawas mo na yung total sa non-cash assets. So zero na ang non-cash mo dyan. So, since merong loss dyan, kasi 480 ang total non-cash, pero nabenta lang siya ng 368, it will be charged to the capital balances. So, yung payments sa creditors naman, babawas natin. Payments sa inside creditor, babawas natin. This is based on the order of priority. And then, partners capital. So you have to have a picture in mind of the statement of liquidation for you to easily compute for items that are squeezed when you are facing the CPALE board exam. Kasi it will be easier for you to reconstruct the information if you have this statement of liquidation in your mind. Okay, let's proceed with installment liquidation. So, tapos na tayo dun sa lump sum. So, under installment liquidation, same process pa rin ang pagdadaanan natin. However, merong other items na ini-include like yung estimated future liquidation expenses, among others. Okay, we use the fact pattern above. So, ang tinutukoy pong fact pattern dito is yung nandoon sa illustration 1. Diba? Ito yung fact pattern. So, nandito na tayo sa installment liquidation. Okay. Use the fact pattern above, but assume that the partnership will be liquidated over a prolonged period of time. So, mas mahaba yung liquidation process dahil installment liquidation ito. Distributions to the partners will be made as cash becomes available. So, information on the first conversion of the non-cash is as follows. So, binigyan ka item A to F. 75% of the AR was collected for 30, half of the inventory was sold for 40K, equipment with carrying amount of 200 was sold for 120, actual liquidation expenses of 2,000 were paid, estimated future liquidation expenses total 1,000. So itong estimated future liquidation, hindi mo ito makikita doon sa lump sum. 9,000 cash was retained in the business for potential unrecorded liabilities and anticipated expenses. Hindi mo rin ito makikita sa lump sum liquidation. Next, the requirement is to determine the amounts of cash distributed to the partners from the partial realization of the partnership assets. So, anong step 1 natin? Cash distribution daw ang tinatanong kung magkano natanggap ng mga partner. So, ang step 1 pa rin natin is to compute for the gain or loss. So, paano tayo nagko-compute ng gain or loss? Una, net cash proceeds ka muna. Kung magkano yung napagbentahan, tapos i-incorporate mo na or ibawas mo na kaagad doon yung liquidation expenses, yung mga future liquidation expenses, at saka yung mga cash settlement, cash retention. Kapag installment liquidation, merong estimated liquidation expenses tsaka cash retention. Pero kapag lump sum, wala kang makikitang ganun. Then, pag na-compute mo yung net cash proceeds niya, then i-compare mo kaagad doon sa carrying amount ng non-cash items, then madidetermine mo na yung loss. So, tingnan nga natin is itong case number 2. The collection on accounts receivable. Magkano ba daw na-collecta? 30,000. Yung inventory nabenta daw ng 40, okay? Yung equipment daw ay nabenta for 120. Meron pa bang ibang items? Wala na. Yung the rest ay reductions na ito. Actual liquidation expenses, 2,000, ibawas mo. Estimated future liquidation expenses, di ba ang sabi dyan, ibawas daw. Kasi in the future, pwedeng magamit yung fund na yon. Next, 9,000 cash was retained in the business for potential unrecorded liabilities and anticipated expenses. So baka may mga admin expenses or baka may mga may ma-uncover na mga liabilities in the while nagli-liquidate. So, nag-retain daw sila ng 9,000. So, ibawas mo na yun kaagad. Okay. So, the net cash proceeds, kasi wala ka ng pagkukuhanan yan in the future. Baka mamaya hindi na mabenta yung ibang assets. So, you recognize it at the first instance. So, the net cash proceeds is 178,000. Magkano ba ang carrying amount ng lahat ng assets? 480,000. The total loss is 302,000. 480 minus 178. So, may notes po tayo dito. Let us read. The procedure above is similar to the procedure used in lump sum with the following additional concept. Expected future expenses are recognized immediately as losses to be allocated to the partner's capital balances. Okay po tayo dyan. Unsold non-cash assets are considered as losses to be allocated also to the partner's capital balances. So ito po yung sinasabi. Kahit na pa nabenta or hindi, itong unsold non-cash assets are itong non-cash assets, whether it is sold or not, are considered losses to be allocated to the partner's capital balances. Okay? To simplify our solution, the total gain or loss to be allocated to the partner's capital balances is computed simply by comparing the net and the carrying amount of all the non-cash assets, whether sold or not. Kasi eventually ko-compare mo rin yan. So let us take a look at this step 2. So now, na-determine mo na yung loss na 302,000. So, it is proper to allocate this on the partners. So, with the right of offset, i-add mo muna po yung liability ng partnership KB. So, ang balance niya ay ganun pa rin sa kanina, 100, 170, and 200. Then, you allocate the loss based on the profit and loss ratio. Then the amounts received is 39,600, 79,400, and 49,000. So when we check it using the format, the beginning balance of cash plus the net proceeds and the payment to outside creditors, you have the cash available 168. So tama po yan. So let us just summarize the lump sum and installment liquidation process. Ito yung mga simple steps that will guide you when you are analyzing partnership liquidation problems. Step 1 is to compute for the net proceeds kung magkano yung pinagbentahan noong non-cash assets. And then, ibawas mo na po doon whether paid or not yung lahat ng expenses, liquidation, future liquidation expenses, or yung mga cash retention, ibawas mo na po. Step 2, you compute for the gain. So, i-compare mo lang po yung na-compute mong net proceeds with the carrying amount of the non-cash assets, whether it is sold or not. So, ganun po siya. Net proceeds, compare mo dun sa carrying amount ng non-cash assets, whether sold or not. Then, step 3, dahil na-determine mo na dun sa step 2 kung magkano ang loss or gain, i-allocate mo na po yung gain or loss dun sa partner's capital or interest. Siyempre, merong right of offset po doon. Pwedeng payable, pwedeng may utang yung partnership or pwedeng yung partner ang may utang. So, then finally, yun na yung magiging settlement noong capital ng bawat partners. So, kung magkano yung final amount na ma-determine mo at step 3, yun na po ang marireceive nila after the process. So let us take a look more on illustration 2. This is a sample also of a lump sum liquidation. So same scenario po tayo. The cash, AR, inventory totaling 500,000. Then we have accounts payable, A capital, B capital, C capital, at 20, 30, 50 ang kanilang profit and loss ratios. So, okay. The third party offered to buy 480,000. The partnership assets including the liabilities but excluding cash, but after the following assets are revalued to fair value. So may AR 45, inventory 75, equipment 320. So the requirement is to determine the amounts of cash distributed to the partners. So please take a look muna on the problem. Okay. Okay, please take a look at the problem. The requirements determine the amounts of cash distributed sa partners. So, magkano daw ang ibabayad natin dun sa partners? Merong sinabi dito na may offer, kumaga nakapackage yung partnership assets and liabilities pero hindi kasama yung cash. Pero ang sabi, dapat i-revalue daw yung after the following assets are revalued to their fair values. Okay. To simplify the solution for this, kasi the process could have been, yung asset ay i-convert mo sa kanilang fair value and then tsaka mo kukunin. And since this is a package deal na po lahat ng assets, the simpler way to compute for this is to get the 480 net proceeds of the sale of the assets as is. So yung 480 na po ang i-compare mo doon sa carrying amount ng mga assets. The carrying amount of the assets are kung magkano yung naka-indicate dyan. Accounts receivable 60, inventory 120, equipment 300,000. So excluding daw yung iyong cash. Okay. Sabi dito, including the liability. So, the liability is, magkano yung liability natin? 50,000. Okay. I think you have to correct the solution on this because yung accounts payable na naka-indicate dito ay 30,000. It's not. It should not be. It should be 50,000. Kasi ito po yun, 50,000. So, tama ba uh, ang ang total nito? 20 plus 60 is 80 plus 120, 200. So, 300, 500. 50 plus 100, 150 plus 150, 300 plus 200, 500. So, tama naman ang totals niya. So, I am thinking of changing the given item pero magkakaroon ng problema sa kanyang totals. So, I think it is but proper for you to change 30,000 accounts payable. It should be 50,000. So, kung 50,000 yan, 60 plus 120 is 180 plus 300 is 480 minus 50 is 400. 430. So, parang tama na may solution. 60, 120. 60 plus 120 plus 300 is 480 minus 50. Okay, so tama yung solution. Tama yung 430. You have to correct this. This should not be for 30K. It should be 50K. 50,000. So, magkano po ang ating gain or on sale? 480 yung proceeds, pero ang carrying amount ay 430. Therefore, may gain na 50,000. So, di ba, ang step 1 is to compute for the una yung gain or loss, and then after noon, step 1, net proceeds ka. So, na-compute mo yung net proceeds, nilift mo na lang dito. Kinuha mo yung third party offer, and then you get the loss. I want to emphasize this. Sir, bakit hindi na po natin consider itong fair values? Because eventually, i-compare mo rin naman yung kung magkano siya binayaran ng third party at yung carrying amount. So, dapat So, para mas mabilis ang computation mo, since this is a package of all the assets and the liabilities, excluding cash, computin mo na siya based on dun sa magkano yung net cash na marireceive. Ito na kasi yun 480. So, i-compute mo na kaagad yun based on that. Kung magkano yung marireceive na cash na bayad versus the carrying amount of the assets sold. So, you have to ignore the revaluation risk kasi hindi na siya relevant on the computation. Okay, next. So next na tayo dito sa ano ba ang next steps? We allocate the gain. How do we allocate the gain? Based on the profit and loss ratio. So kung 50,000, multiply mo lang yan sa profit and loss ratios nila. So ang amounts received by the partners ay 110 for A, 165 for B, 225 for C. Total 500,000. We check. We check this. The beginning balance 20,000 plus the net proceeds from the sale of the assets and liabilities 480,000. Total of 500,000. So tama ba? Yes. Sir, meron po akong question dito. Bakit po doon sa previous templates ay binabawas po natin yung liabilities to outside creditors? Yes, tama yun. But in this example kasi, ang included sa package is yung liability. So, kasama dun sa 418 binili yung assets at yung liability. So, therefore, hindi mo na yan isasama on the computation of your uh, cash available for distribution to partners. So, yun po yung sagot doon. Okay, let's proceed with illustration 3. On January 1, partners A and B who share profits and losses on a 3-1 ratio. So, may 3 and 1 ratio. 3/4 kay A and 1/4 kay B. Decided to liquidate the business. As of the day, the following info has been determined. So, binigyan ka dyan ng cash, other assets, liabilities, and then capital. I-compute mo nga muna kung balance ba ang iyong debits and credits. So, cash, 20 plus 480, 500. Then, liability, 50 plus 250, 300 plus 200 is 500. Okay, balance siya, 500. So, in the first month of liquidation, 180,000 were received on the sale of some assets. Okay. Liquidation expenses, 5,000 were paid. Additional liquidation expenses were anticipated, 2,000. Creditors were paid 28. Okay, available cash was distributed to the partners. Determine the amounts of cash to be distributed to the partners. Okay, first step ulit tayo. The first step is the computation of the net proceeds, then gain or loss, and then allocate. So tandaan mo, step 1, net proceeds. Step 2, gain or loss. Step 3, allocate. Okay, step 1 is net proceeds. Magkano ba binenta yung mga assets? Okay, sale of certain non-cash assets, 180. Okay, meron pa bang ibang binenta? Wala na. Pero ang sabi kasi, i-incorporate mo na daw kaagad dito yung liquidation expenses, actual liquidation expenses, mga cash retention. Okay, actual liquidation expenses, 5,000, bawas mo. Estimated future liquidation expenses, itong 2,000 na ito, yung anticipated na yan, ay ibawas mo 2,000. Meron pa ba? Wala na. So, 180 minus 5 minus 2 is 173,000. Yan po ang net cash proceeds mo. I-compare, so step 2 ka na, compare for the loss or the gain. The carrying amount of all, magkano ba ang carrying amount ng non-cash assets? 480. Ito yon. So lagay mo dyan. So, magkano? 480 yung non-cash minus 173, loss ka 307,000. So, whether or, ang sabi dito, hindi naman lahat ng assets ay nabenta. Pero, matatandaan mo dun sa ating discussion, whether or not the non-cash assets are sold or not, whether the non-cash assets are sold or not, ina-account mo na yun dyan sa yung computation of gain or loss under the installment liquidation. So, magkano ang loss mo? 307,000. So, ito po yun. So, ito yung Notes, remember the following concepts. Estimate expected future expenses are recognized immediately as losses. So, okay. Kasi ina-account na natin agad yun as a reduction doon sa cash proceeds. Next, it doesn't matter whether or not all the non-cash assets were sold. Any unsold asset is considered as loss. So, yun po yung paulit-ulit na sinasabi ng ating ng libro regarding the partnership liquidation, especially installment liquidation, whether or not the non-cash assets has been sold or not, any unsold asset is considered as a loss. So now let's compute for the cash distribution. So step 3 na tayo, yung allocation. Ang capital balances nila 250, 200,000. So allocation of loss, magkano ba loss? 307,000 times profit and loss sharing ratio nila 3/4 kay A BA 1/4. So yan. Amounts received by partners, 19,754 A, 123,254 B. Total 143,000. Let us check. The beginning balance of cash is 20,000. Okay. The net cash proceeds is 173. Okay. The partial payment of liabilities, may binanggit dito, creditors were paid 28,000. So, ilagay po natin, nagbayad daw ng 28,000. Remember, yung portion na ito sa template, dapat ito yung payment to outside creditors. So, partial payment of liabilities, 28,000. Next, cash set aside for the unpaid balance of the liabilities, 50,000 minus 28,000 is 22,000. So, anong napansin mo dyan? Ang sinasabi lang dyan is yung liabilities to the outside creditor should be prioritized. So, ibig sabihin ay uunahin mo munang bayaran yan bago ka mag-distribute sa partners mo. Kaya nga, kahit na hindi naka-indicate itong creditors were paid 28,000 ay automatically dapat ibawas mo yan sa cash available for distribution to partners. Di ba nga, matatandaan mo sa ating illustration. Let us go back dun sa order of priority. Ang sabi, number 1 is outside creditor. Number 3 lang yung owner's capital balances. So, magkano po ang final amount? 143,000. So, basahin mo lang itong note dito and that will be the discussion. That would be a reiteration of what I have said. So I think that ends the discussion on the part 1 of partnership liquidation. Please continue on the next discussion video for more of accounting for partnership liquidation. Thank you.